program means a lot to a lot of people. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to my mom, who I'm privileged to introduce today, Celie Halzel, otherwise known as Celie. And she is a survivor of the Holocaust, and we're going to hear her story now. Some of you have heard it before. It's been a few years. I have memories of introducing you a few times here in the Stir Family Gymnasium, one time on Facebook Live during COVID, and I'm really glad we're getting to do this today. And we view this as a little bit of a transition. As you heard from my mom, it's important for all of us to hear this story so that we can all have the knowledge and have the ability to share it. And also, it's a time where the children of survivors like myself are taking on more responsibility, as we will be the ones who will share this story in the future. So this time I'm sitting next to her, helping as I can. I helped rewrite her speech and cater it a little bit more for you for today. And I'm going to turn things over to her now. Toda rabah.
Shalom, everyone. I want to thank your teachers and all of you children who participated and who are here today to hear my story. I know it's not easy to listen to this. I'm very thankful to all of you for giving me the opportunity of telling you the story and helping to pass it along and keep it alive. I think it's so important at this time. I'm luckier than most Holocaust survivors, for I was a very young child at the time of the Holocaust. And most of what I will tell you was told to me by the only two survivors in my family, my older sister Blanca and my Aunt Pearl. Before I tell you my personal story, I would like to share something else with you. You might know that there are people who claim that the Holocaust never happened. I am a witness that it did happen. By listening to the story of my childhood, you also become witnesses. My adopted father, Noah, always said, and I quote him, "We are in the world to fulfill a mission in order to make our lives something to be proud of." So today, as I tell you about my history, I would like to honor the people in my family who, by rescuing my sister, my aunt, and me, certainly fulfilled such a mission. And now for my story. I was born in Radowitz, Romania, just prior to World War II. The Jews of Radowitz are descendants of those who came from Galicia, which is now part of Poland. The Jewish population of Radowitz numbered 3,500 out of a total population of 11,000. Many of the older Jewish townspeople had attended German schools and spoke German. They were fervent supporters of German culture and then played an important role in the business and cultural life of Radowitz. They thought of themselves as Romanians first and Jews second. My family belonged to the middle class. It was my father Moshe, my mother Hazel, my sister Blanca, and me, Celie. My father owned a brush factory. For a time during the 1930s, life seemed safe and secure. Few among the Jews in Radowitz, my parents included, could believe that in just a short time, our lives would be changed so drastically. Many of my parents' friends had already gone to Canada or America before the rumblings of war had begun. For my parents, the prospect of leaving with 2 small children must have been even more frightening, and so they remained, hoping that things would blow over and life would be back to normal. But, as we now know, life never returned to normal for the Jews in Europe, and most definitely not for us in Radowitz. From 1938 to 1940, Romania came increasingly under German power. Germany needed Romania for its oil, its grains, its meats. Pogroms, organized massacres, were instituted against the Jewish people. In September of 1941, the Jews of Radowitz, my family among them, were deported to Transnistria, to the labor camp of Mogilev and Tilchin. Many died before reaching the camps. My family entered the forced camp of Mogilev, located about 500 miles from our hometown. There, disease, hunger, and ruthless treatment further depleted the Jewish population. I was 2 years old. We remained there from May 1941 to June 1944. In the camp, we lived crowded together in a small hut with other members of the family. Food consisted of what was called potato soup, but in reality was nothing more than potato peels in a watery liquid. For this meal, a member of the family had to line up each day with a little pail in their hand and wait for hours in all kinds of weather to receive their meager portion. For years, I bore the evidence of malnutrition. However, hunger was not nearly as hard to bear as was the loss of my parents. Without medication, my father, a diabetic, became ill and soon died. Shortly after, an influenza virus raged through the camp and claimed my mother's life. I still grieve that she was not even given a proper burial. The goal of the Germans was to eliminate all of the Romanian Jews. What prevented this from taking place was the defeat of the German and Romanian forces in Stalingrad in 1943. Following the death of my parents, my Aunt Pearl took upon herself the responsibility of caring for and protecting my sister and me. One day, when the order came to gather our belongings and proceed to the waiting train, my Aunt Pearl knew that she must somehow keep us off that train. So just before boarding, she offered her last bit of jewelry as a bribe to the guard, who was about to force us into a cattle car already filled with many Jews. Miraculously, the guard took the jewelry and allowed us to slip away. My Aunt Pearl was right. The train was on its way to Auschwitz, and those who were forced to remain on the train all perished. In the Talmud, which is probably one of the greatest Jewish works, it is written that he who has one life, he who saves one life, it is as though he has saved the whole world. Surely that is a very fitting quote from my Aunt Pearl, my mother's sister. Only 2,000 of the total population of 8,000 survived the labor camps and returned to Radowitz. Before the Holocaust, many Jews lived in big homes. They owned successful businesses and factories. Returning from the labor camps, sick in the body and in the soul, they found their homes destroyed and confiscated, and their possessions taken. I can't even imagine how my Aunt Pearl, traveling by foot in the cold with two little girls, managed to get us back to our hometown, a distance of almost 500 miles. Our rabbi once delivered a stirring sermon on the topic of the guardian angels in my life. I have been blessed to have had many guardian angels in my life. I would like to honor my guardian angels today by telling you a little bit about them, as I have already started to do. My birth parents, Hazel and Moshe, were my first guardian angels. And then there was my Aunt Pearl. She protected us, got us back to Radowitz, and found us a place to live. Eventually, help for those who did live to return to Radowitz came from an organization, you might be familiar with it. It's called HIAS, the Jewish Immigrant Aid Society, and from relatives living in the United States and in Canada. In our case, our help came from a cousin in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. After finding a place for us to live, Aunt Pearl wrote to relatives and told them that 3 members of our family had survived, and asked for their help in bringing us out of Romania. Cousin Noah, my next guardian angel, was working at the time as a volunteer for HIAS, helping to resettle immigrants coming into Canada at the port of the city of Halifax. From 1944 to 1947, my family did not give up. Letters were written, parcels of food and clothing sent to us, documents produced, and arrangements made, but only for my sister and me. My Aunt Pearl had to remain in Romania for almost another year before her immigration papers were cleared. My sister Blanca, at age 11, I at age 8, said goodbye to our aunt and traveled to an internment camp called Camp Rothschild in Vienna. My sister was certainly another one of my guardian angels. Her Hebrew name was Bracha. She was a blessing to me my whole life. She protected and cared for me after we left Aunt Pearl. We remained in the internment camp for 6 months until an old convoy ship called the SS Sturgis became available. The ship had been used to ferry troops across the Atlantic, headed for the war in Europe. Now it would carry my sister and me, the 2 youngest of 2,000 orphans, all of us survivors of the Holocaust, from the port of Bremerhaven, Germany, to the port of Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Now go back with me to February of 1948, for that was when I first got my glimpse of the city, which was to become my new home, the city of Halifax in Canada. The pier at which the ship docked, Pier 21, has today been transferred into a mini Ellis Island. It was through this port of entry that waves of European immigrants, 50,000 brides from England, 3,000 evacuee children, as well as refugees from all over the world, passed through its halls. It was also the place from which 494,000 soldiers left for Europe during World War II. Most immigrants who stepped off the gangplank in Halifax did not speak a word of English. The Jewish immigrants were met by volunteers from the Jewish Immigrant Aid Society. My cousin Noah Heinisch served as one of those volunteers. Speaking Yiddish, he would calm the fears of the frightened men and women and help them board the trains that would take them to family members awaiting their arrival in cities and towns throughout Canada. On that cold, wintry day in February of 1948, when we arrived at Pier 21, stood Noah and his wife Sarah Heinisch, another of my guardian angels. Noah greeted us in Yiddish, and Sarah immediately bundled us up in warm winter coats, boots, gloves, hats, hugged us, and took us home. The names of those who set foot on Canadian soil through Pier 21 are engraved in a wall of honor. Among these names are the names of the 3 remaining members of my family: Pearl Appel, my aunt, Blanca Lackner, my older sister, and my name, Celie Lackner. My Aunt Pearl arrived about a year later, and by that time, cousins Noah and his wife Sarah had grown to love us so much, they agreed that life would be easier for my aunt and better for us if we remained with them. They helped her settle in Montreal among family. My sister and I were eventually adopted by my cousin Noah, who was then, are you ready for this? 60 years old, and his wife Sarah, who was 50. We were blessed to be showered by them with love and all the opportunities which life could afford. My new parents called their home Gan Eden. You know what that means. Garden of Eden. How appropriate, for my sister and I truly felt as though we had stepped out of the depths and into the Garden of Eden. 2 weeks after we arrived, speaking not a word of English, we were enrolled at the neighborhood elementary school. Neither my sister nor I had attended school in Romania. So at the age of 9, I was put in the 2nd grade, and my sister into the 4th grade. I remember feeling relieved that I was very small for my age, thus avoiding being made fun of because I was 2 years older than the rest of the children in the class. For most of my years at lower school, I was one of only 2 or 3 Jewish students in the class. My sister and I were tutored in the English language several days a week after school, and how thrilled I was that by the time the school year ended, just 4 months after arriving in Halifax, I was speaking English fluently. It was very important to me to be identified not as a little immigrant girl, but as Canadian. I did not socialize with my classmates after school. My friends were all Jewish, the boys and girls from my synagogue, my Hebrew school, Young Judea group, and summer camp, among whom I felt more comfortable. But try, if you will, to imagine how hysterical I was when I first heard my parents say, girls, you are going to camp in July. To me, camp meant a return to Mogilev. To me, camp meant the detention camp. What could my sister and I have possibly done? I cried, to mourn being sent back to camp. Well, of course, camp didn't mean Mogilev. It meant Kadima, a Zionist summer camp outside of Halifax, which I loved attending for many years with my friends. I have to admit that as a Holocaust survivor, there have been times when I have felt angry and discouraged, recalling the events which shaped my destiny. As a Holocaust survivor, I had so very much hoped to leave a better world for all of our children and grandchildren, for all of you, than the world that I was born into. So it's little wonder that I have shed tears about October 7th, 2023 in Israel and the rest, and the rise in anti-Semitism that has occurred since then. But then I look at my precious 4 grandchildren. I think you might know them. Matan, Ariella, Adina, Gilad, all graduates from Denver Jewish Day School, the next generation in a link unbroken. And I think, no, Hitler, your final solution did not work and will not work. And I remember my husband, who devoted over 40 years of his life as a head of Jewish schools, ensuring quality Jewish education for the children who will be the Jewish leaders in the future. And I think, no, Hitler, your final solution did not work and will never work. And I remember fondly the hundreds of children in my Hebrew classes over the 42 years that I taught, whose lives I have been privileged to touch, as together we studied Hebrew language and Jewish heritage. And what do I think? No, Hitler, your final solution did not work and will not work. And as I watch my son, Avi, walking in his father's footsteps as the CEO of the school here at DJDS, and see how he blesses his 4 children each Friday night in the name of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And yes, again I think, no, Hitler, your final solution did not work and will never work. And so I stopped feeling angry and discouraged, and instead I am thankful and only hope that I have lived each day of my life in such a way as to deserve to have survived when so many others who were also deserving did not. As a Hebrew teacher in a Jewish day school, my students knew that I was a survivor. And throughout the years, they often ran into class begging me to tell them what I called Mrs. Halzel stories. I doled out those stories like a parent doles out candy, a little bit every once in a while. I would like to share one with you, Mrs. Halzel's story with you, that I told them. When my sister and I boarded the convoy ship in Canada in February of 1948, the trip took 2 weeks. For most of the journey, we encountered very rough seas, and I especially was very sick. Near the end of the trip, when we had begun to feel a little bit better, We headed for the dining room, and on the way, one of the seamen saw us. He took 2 Hershey chocolate bars out of his pocket and gave us each one. This was a brand new experience for us. We unwrapped the bar slowly, and I can still recall the wonderful chocolate smell. Each bar was divided into 10 squares. We broke up one little bar each day and slowly nibbled away at it. I once read a midrash which said that the manna which fed the Israelites in the desert would taste like anything each person wanted it to taste like. I definitely would have wished it to taste like a Hershey chocolate bar. The shiny tinfoil paper the bar was wrapped in was my first toy, and I played with it for the rest of the trip, eating only one little square of chocolate a day in order to make this treat last as long as possible. The day after relating this particular story to my students, when I arrived in class, there were 22 smiling children surrounding my desk, each one holding a Hershey chocolate bar for their teacher. In my heart, I know that these are the children who will pass on our stories, and they will stand up and say loud and clear, never again. As a survivor, I cannot help but feel that I have walked through life as Celie Halzel, in the body of little Celie Luckner, whose life would have been quite different had it not been for the Holocaust. The word Zachor, remember, appears no fewer than 160 times in the Torah. To this day, the Holocaust survivors I know spend their time sharing their memories with young people, not for the sake of revenge, but its opposite, to teach tolerance and the value of life. We remember the past, not to be held captive, but rather to turn it into a blessing and a source of hope. My late sister and I always felt that we had much to thank our adopted parents, Noah and Sarah, for. But as survivors, the most important lesson they taught us was how not to dwell too much on the past. One must rather pick up the pieces of one's life and move on. And move on is what we did. And on the way we learned that if history teaches us anything, it is a very simple rule. Out of the ashes, something new and beautiful can emerge. Out of disappointment, new dreams can be born. Yes, even when there's nothing left, something can be created with little more than hopes and dreams. Thank you so much for taking time to
Thank you so much, Mrs. Halzel, for sharing your story with us. It was very inspiring, and I can assure you that we will all take your words to heart and continue to tell your story because it really is very meaningful. And we have been informed that you will be returning to Florida tomorrow, so we would like to give you a little snack for the plane. So we have a little gift for you to take with you back home. Thank you so much.